everybody. Welcome to the 74th episode of the Manor Podcast. I'm your co-host, Roger Bodee, joined as always with my other co-host and best friend. I said it backwards, but we're going to roll with it. You're my co-host and best friend, as well as my best friend and co-host, Michael Hamilton. Michael, I was talking to Wesley yesterday, or was it 2 days ago? I was talking to Wesley recently, and he asked me, like, well, how are you going to teach your son things? Or, like, why do you want to do things in life? And it's just like, well, everybody knows the secret to life is just like exercise, eat well, and surround yourself with good people. So why is it so easy to know what the good thing is and so hard to do the actual good thing?
Well,
like we all like it's just like, why is it?
It's a really deep question.
I know. It's just like everybody knows, like, and if you remove yourself from the equation, you're just like, oh, objectively, like, yeah, if you just remove yourself, like, person X should do this. And it's like, well, okay, well, why don't you do that? Well, it's like, well, I don't want to, you know?
I would say that, like, it's easy to say you should exercise and you should eat well, but like, and you surround yourself with good people, all those things are like, yeah, you should do those things. But like, it's not really that simple. Like, what does exercise mean? Like, is that like doing how much exercise should you do? Should you spend your whole life exercising? Probably not. So you have to figure out how much you should be exercising, what exercises you should be doing. And it adds like an extra level of complexity to it. And then it's also like, on top of like uncertainty about what you should be doing, because like I've been running in the mornings for a while now, for a couple months, but like how much running should I be doing? I don't know. Should I be running every day? Should I take days off?
Yeah, the calories, you should be burning more calories in a day than you're taking in.
There's nothing that tells me how many calories I should be doing or burning, or how many calories I'm taking.
Well, that's part of good eating.
I start tracking that, but that
wasn't. Yeah. Well,
that wasn't one of the three things you listed. You said eat well. You didn't say track my diet very carefully.
You got to eat well by tracking your calories to make sure you're getting the right nutrients out. Like, otherwise, you don't know if you're eating well.
So I think this is a little bit deep for an intro, but I think like it's not as simple as those three things at all.
I think it is,
because
I think I thought that's just the secret of life, and I figured it out, and I'm very smart.
Okay. I'm happy for you, buddy.
Just like I figured out.
Glad you figured it all out.
Lexi is the best deck in class constructed, and I'm not playing Lexi in Dallas this weekend. That was the whole point of this segue.
I see.
As I know something's objectively the best, not doing it.
I'm playing Lexi.
I know. You're also exercising and eating well and surrounding yourself with good people. You're checking all four of the boxes, and I'm on maybe like 1.5, maybe. I think I eat okay, and I surround myself with good people. I don't play Lexi, and I'm not currently exercising. Unless you count running around with Austin on the playground exercising.
You want to run with me in the morning?
I don't want to make time.
I'll come over to your house. We can go run at the park near you.
It's cold now. It's fall.
That's why you gotta wear warm clothes.
I know. I get to wear my long sleeve shirty doos now.
I got little like running gloves now. They have like the things on the fingers so that I can use my phone with my gloves on.
Wow.
It's sick.
The future is now.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So you're playing Lexi in Dallas.
I am, yeah.
Okay. Are you worried about Azalea now that Azalea beat up all the Lexis?
Honestly, I'm just going to go have a good time. I'm going to play some Flesh and Blood. I'll probably lose some games. Well, I don't know what I'll lose to. I'm sure I'll lose to something. I wasn't going to go to Dallas until Brody was like, hey, you can stay here at my house. And I'm like, okay, well, that's enough to get me to go. We're going to play some board games. It'll be great. And we're going to do some drafting, some Bright Lights draft, which is hard to do online now.
Mm-hmm.
Much easier to do in person. And I think I'm testing less for this tournament. I guess I've been saying that a lot, that I've been testing less for tournaments.
Every tournament for the past like 2 years, you're like, I haven't tested that much. But I'm just going to play this
No, I
deck.
tested a lot for Worlds last year.
Okay.
I think.
I don't
I think
remember.
I did.
That's way too long ago. But ever
Okay.
since Worlds, I
But
guess you haven't tested that hard.
yeah, I think
You're the world champion. You're on top. Who
that's
cares? You keep winning anyways.
no, it's honestly like, well, I have still been doing well since I've been testing less. Not, I would say this year has not been as good as last year, but I think even if I was testing like 24/7, it'd be ridiculous to expect the same results they got last year. They were
Is this year worse than last
very,
year?
very good. Yeah.
Did you make top? No, you didn't make top
Last
eight.
year,
Yeah, last year you made top eight of the Pro Tour. You didn't make top eight of a Pro Tour this year.
no, I've never top eighted a Pro Tour.
That's right. That's the one thing you've never done. You still haven't top eight of the Pro Tour. Yeah, I was like,
I have not. And
Baltimore
they
was
only
like,
gave me one chance this year.
yeah. It's looking like there's going to be multiple chances next year if I'm reading between the lines correctly on some tweets.
I hope so. I hope so. I'm excited that the first one is in March. That's nice and early in the year. Plenty of time to fit in a second one.
And they announced it.
So
Look
we'll
at
see.
LSS go. Thank you. Like,
Yeah.
awesome.
It's like
Amazing.
5 months away and we know where and when.
It's awesome. I love it. Great job.
Yeah. Yeah. And we know how much it's for too. It's a 200K. So hopefully that means that, like, when they announced 200K, that kind of made me a little hesitant because I'm like, does that mean that there's only going to be one Pro Tour again? Because that was kind of like their reasoning.
Mhm.
Like, they did one Pro Tour this year and they bumped up the prize pool from 100K to 200K because they were only doing one. So seeing the first one next year, it's a little over a month earlier in the year than this year's was. And the prize pool went up to 200K. So either they're planning to do multiple Pro Tours and just increasing the total amount of prize money they're giving out for Flesh and Blood next year, which would be, that would be great. That'd be cool. The game's been growing. So,
well, that
yeah,
and let's
hopefully
say
that's the case. But
there's some kind of business and they make money every time they release a new product and people buy it. If they go up to 4 sets a year from 3 sets a year, that's more times they make money during a year, right?
Sure.
So then they can afford. I don't know. That's just like a super simplistic business way to look at it. I don't know. Not that hosting $200,000 tournaments is like necessarily a good business decision, anyways. But I don't know.
I think it's a great business decision. I wouldn't have been playing Flesh and Blood if they didn't do their, if they didn't host tournaments. I would have never
really?
started.
The person who's won over $100,000 playing this game thinks it was a really good business decision. I'm shocked.
I'm a fan.
I believe it. So not only am I not playing Lexi and Dallas, we're going all the way to the other end of the spectrum in terms of like there's difference between like not eating well and not exercising and not surrounding yourself with good people, and then like drinking and smoking and eating nothing but candy and then going and surrounding yourself with bad people. So those are like actively making bad decisions. And I'm playing Bolton. So that's probably closer to that. That's probably closer to like eating nothing but candy for like a week is probably what I would consider playing Bolton in the tournament next weekend.
Hey, we made a couple tier lists and Bolton didn't do too bad, right?
I put him on B
and C tier, I think. Yeah.
After testing him, he was not supposed to be in B. But B for Bolton. How wrong could it be?
Should he?
And you put him in C tier.
In C tier?
Yeah, you put him in C tier. So maybe that bodes well for me because he'll be the secret hero.
I put Icelander in C tier last time.
Yeah. And he put Azalea in B tier. I put Azalea in C tier, and then Azalea won the last tournament. So my C tier hero won last week, and now your C tier hero will win next week. That's just how it has to go.
Yeah. That sounds right. No logical fallacies there. Nothing weird going on. That's just how it'll be.
Yep, that's just how the world works. I can't explain it. I'm not a scientist, Michael, but I just know how things work. Sun rises, sun sets.
C tier heroes win tournaments.
Mm-hmm. Just how it goes. So I think last weekend, though, if we look to Taipei, I think Azalea and Dromai were maybe. I know Dromai was definitely the second most represented deck. Lexi was by far and away the most represented deck, But do you think that's just like, what do you think about those heroes making a resurgence, especially Azalea?
Yeah, I don't think it's a surprise that Dromai did really well. Like Dromai was already pretty high on our list and has been for a while. And then the Tome of the Imperial Flame, the new card that she got, is really really powerful. It's kind of in line with some of the other tomes we have in this game
Mhm.
in terms of power level. Very very good in the right spots, and I think because of that, I'm not really surprised to see Dromai doing well. Azalea was a little bit more of a surprise for me. I think that it's a hero that if the format has no Warmonger's diplomacy and there's not a lot of like tall defense reactions in the Guardian decks, I don't think her Lexi matchup's too bad. I would say Lexi's I guess it depends a lot on the build. I shouldn't say one side is favored to the other because
I think
it
it's a
matters a
dead
lot
50-50.
for both
Yeah,
sides what they're
on
playing.
average.
Yeah. So having a reasonable Lexi matchup and being in a spot where the format's not playing like the best hate card against you it makes sense that Azalea would do well. And the power level's there.
Yeah, and if we think about overall meta representation now, so Lexi's not going to run Warmongers, and she's 20% of the field. Dromai's not going to bring Warmongers, and she's like 15% of the field. If Azalea is
I
also 5% of the field, that's like 40% of the field. That's just straight up not going to be on Warmongers before factoring in all the other decks in the format.
I think Dromai can be on Warmongers if she wants to be. It's definitely a card that you could run in a Dromai deck. I think because of Tome, they're kind of incentivized to shift away from playing blues and just play more reds
Yeah,
instead.
I think
But
Tome is what
it
makes
is
me
a
make me made the face more than anything, is because you got Tome, you have all the dragons you want to be playing. Like Dromai has a lot of non-attack actions she's wanting to weave with these attack actions.
sure.
I don't know.
But yeah, that's fair.
It's a card that
I've
like
definitely
I,
seen it in some Dromai
yeah,
decks.
like it's a card that I would want to bring in against Dromai because I feel like it could buy you space, especially if they don't have a board. They kind of have to pick between attacking you with their red attacks or setting up their board. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe I'm wrong. I'm not a Dromai expert and
Me neither. I just know that she's
don't
unplayable.
know if I ever will be. We'll see. Hmm. Hmm. I don't think Dromai is unplayable.
Oh, I can't believe
So
Bolton has a bad Dromai matchup. That's so surprising to me. I was so confident that Bolton would be good into Dromai, and he's just not.
why?
Mm.
Bolton's good against decks that want to block with attack actions a lot.
Yeah, but you get all your mopey bad on hit effects guaranteed when you kill their dragons. Like all your engulfing lights always go to soul, and all of your illuminates always go to
Mm-hmm.
soul, and all of your bolt of
Mm-hmm.
purges always draw a card. It's great. No, there's those.
I
You're
think
telling me that
the
even when you get your
biggest
on hits, those cards aren't amazing rates.
well that's not it so much as like the cards aren't amazing rates when you're getting your on hit, but anytime you're attacking a dragon to kill it rather than popping it, the Dromai is getting very good value. So if Dromai plays, I don't know, a Kyloria and attacks you for 4, and then you spend a card to kill it, or you spend 2 cards and get some on hit bonus because you're Bolton. The Dromai spent 2 cards and then attacked for 4 and essentially blocked for 4 or 2 or whatever the power of the attack that you attacked it with.
Mm.
And that's she's getting 6 points of value out of her thing. Even if your attack's hitting, it's still like the Dromai did pretty well in that value exchange. And if the dragon's ever going to attack twice, then it's really, really good for her.
Yeah, that makes sense. Oh well. Any other heroes you expect to pop up, make a big new splashy resurgence here at the tail end of Lexi's dominance?
Yeah, I mean, we talked about it on the tier list episode. That was last week, I think.
Yeah, that's
Last
fair.
week. Still think Bravo's good. I think Bravo will be around. New shoes are good.
Oh yeah, I played a lot of Bravo. I thought I was going to play Bravo. I thought I was going to play Bravo, and then I thought I was going to play Uzuri, and then I thought I was going to play Icelander, and then I thought I was going to play anything that wasn't Bolton. And here I am playing Bolton. Uh, but the shoes are. I like the way you put it. I think you said in our Discord that it's like an inverse stalagmite, where you like with Stalagmite, you wanted to time the frostbite such that it was the most disruptive to your opponent. And now with the shoes, you want to time it such that your opponent gets the least amount of value from the go again. So it's a really skill testing card. But that was your point. I didn't know if you wanted to
Yeah,
expand on
yeah. I I think that's just true. I think that's I think the shoes are a really good design because a lot of the equipment just sits around waiting for breakpoints to be hit, and then you're like, I'm going to use this to stop this breakpoint that has an on hit, and they just sit there until that point in the game. And the shoes, you are incentivized to do something differently with them because it has this other effect similar to Stalagmite, similar to Scowling Fleshbag, where there's like it's doing something other than just preventing damage and stopping on hits, which is really cool.
Yeah. And by the way, the shoes are called Civic Steps. I just wanted to say their actual name. I just looked it up real quick, just to, instead of saying the shoes,
Ah,
Civic Steps.
yeah, Civic Steps.
Although I do say shoes a lot because it's like one of the 50 words Austin knows at this time. So so if you're like, Austin, do you want to put on your shoes? He goes, shoe, shoe, and then he runs
Oh,
towards the shoes. He knows about shoes now.
cute.
He's very cute. Well, on that note,
Okay.
let's transition on to one of our other topics here. What do you want to move on to?
So I got a few, or I guess we've had a few questions that I kind of wanted to talk about on this episode. Um, Recently, one of my old coaching students, Zach, messaged me some questions that I want to talk to, and then we have some from the mailbag channel that we haven't gotten around to. But is that okay?
Yeah, but it's not a mailbag episode. This is whatever the title of
It's
is
not.
up there. Whatever it says up there, it's not going to say mailbag. Is it whatever
Okay.
the
Well,
YouTube thumbnail says? I guess I can't point to the YouTube thumbnail if people are watching it. But whatever it says, wherever you see the thumbnail, it's not going to say mailbag either. This isn't a mailbag. This is just us taking some questions and answering them.
okay. So Zach asked me. He said he was curious about the start, about mindset at the start of a match. So he asked me, "Do you have a particular idea of how you want to play the matchup? For example, aggro versus mid range versus going long, or is it better to have a mindset of how to play around their power cards, and in the meantime, you just play your hands out to the best of their ability?"
So,
What do you think?
well, you want me to? He asked you, but if you want me to,
Yeah, I read the question. Let's.
Okay. He asked you, so now you're asking me on his behalf, so you can answer it after me.
Yeah. You answer. Yes.
Okay. So I think it's important in Flesh and Blood to have a general idea and sense of the meta, so you know generally what your deck and your opponent is going to present to you ahead of time. Best example of that obviously is going to be if you're against a wizard, you're going to play your null rune equipment because you know that they have null rune card or arcane damage spells in their deck, so you're going to want this special piece of equipment to counteract their super special type of damage. That's like level 0 of like doing playing, like making decisions or pre-game mindsets based on what your opponent's doing. But that's kind of where heroes that have multiple game plan strategies, like I've started playing Bolton this weekend, but I haven't revealed what type of Bolton deck I'm playing. And he's one of the few heroes in the game that can kind of vary pretty differently between a Sabers, a Fatigue strategy, a Great Axe build, or Raiden builds. All play pretty different. So those kind of unexpected things can happen, although they're usually pretty rare overall in the metagames. And then lastly, I think it's incumbent on you to get a sense in the game. Not only, I think they said about like your opponent's power cards, but also your power cards, what kind of life total ranges. And I think there's a lot of context to all of this. So it's important to not just have like a static mindset, I guess, overall, is what I would say. It's important to kind of keep evaluating things on a turn by turn or even card by card basis and just kind of adjusting your game plan constantly.
Yeah, I agree with that. So I would say at the start of the match, I'm definitely thinking about like my power cards, their power cards, what things interact in what ways. Like, so I've been playing a lot of Lexi, and one thing that happens a lot is if your opponent's blocking you out every turn, they're never attacking you back. Sometimes you'll draw 3 of a kind and a blue and 2 other arrows in your hand, and you're just like, I can cast this 3 of a kind, but I was going to be able to fire the arrows anyway. So like, some of your cards line up poorly against specific things your opponent's doing, whereas something like a pump spell like Premeditate or Lightning Press is really good when your opponent's just blocking you out because it lets you kind of get around Voltaire's restriction of 2 arrows per turn. So kind of the cards that are important change based on how the games are going. Whereas Three of a Kind is the best card in a racing situation where you want to be able to block with 1 or 2 cards, then spend your pitch of blue or use Tunic to cast Three of a Kind and just get to play a full hand after blocking with 2 cards. A mini Carrion Husk.
Yeah, infamously
Um,
called that now. Yeah.
So I guess as certain cards are eliminated from your opponent's deck, you're like if you're playing as a matchup I've played a lot of in the last few days is Bravo against Lexi. So one tip for the Bravos is if your Lexi opponent, if you're like through a third or a half of the game and your Lexi opponent hasn't seen any Three of a Kinds yet, maybe it's not a good time to take some damage to present some big attack that's not dominated, because then she'll just block and play Three of a Kind probably because she hasn't seen any. On the other side of things, if your Lexi opponent plays Three of a Kinds in the first few turns of the game and you still have enough life left that you can take some damage to send some big on hits, it's much more appealing to do that even without dominate, because you know that since she's out of all the Three of a Kinds, or even if she's out of 2 Three of a Kinds, it makes it a lot less likely to happen, that it's going to be much less likely that she can just block with 2 cards, play Three of a Kind, and send a full hand back at you.
Or even something like, let's say you see them play 1 lightning press early, and then 2 or 3 or 4 turns go by, they haven't played a lightning press or a rain razors yet. That also might be an indication that it might be okay to try to take some damage, because they're more likely to draw into those kind of instant speed effects that aren't able to block then. So there's, like I said, there's just so much context and nuance based on every turn cycle, what cards your opponents have seen, what cards you haven't seen, resources in deck, total blue counts. And one thing that's, I guess if you're playtesting on Talishar or something like that, it's a lot easier to keep track of these alternative resources, because if you want to see what's in their graveyard, I guess you can't sort their graveyard on Talishar for some reason, but you can just look at it and just be like, oh, okay, easily. You don't have to give your opponent the information that you're looking at their graveyard or what's in their banner zone. I think the most important one is just deck size count. It's just always easy to see, like, okay, they have 40 cards in deck. I have 45 cards in deck. I'm about to draw 4. I got 41 to 40. I'm up 1 card in deck. It's just like you can constantly see that number changing all the time. And it's a lot easier to lose track of that in paper, obviously.
Yeah, definitely. One thing about Talishar not sorting graveyards, I don't think you're supposed to sort graveyards in paper either. Like, you can't sort your opponent's graveyard.
People do all the time. You're not supposed to keep your you're not supposed to leave your Rain Razors, Art of War, or non-attack actions on the battlefield either, Michael. You're not supposed to tap your card and leave it on the side of the battlefield to remember your opponent about your Starstruck effects. People do all kinds of things that you're not supposed to do in Flesh and Blood.
I don't think any of that is against the rules. I think it is actually against the rules to sort your opponent's discard pile, but maybe I'm wrong.
That's one of those rules that I would think is just as, it could be there, but I've never once ever seen that be enforced at any time in my entire life. And I've seen plenty of people flick through and be like, okay, how many Three of a Kinds have you played? Go through, put 1 Three of a Kind on top, second Three of a Kind. Okay. Like, I've seen that happen a lot. I probably even done it at some point in time.
So going back, Zach had some follow-up questions. So he said, as well as the definition of aggro and mid-range, as a Magic player, these have a particular definition for him. However, for me, I'm going to read it from his perspective. As a Magic player, these have a particular definition for me. However, I am not sure the same definition holds for Flesh and Blood. Heroes seem much more adaptable throughout the game. What do you think about that? Or do you want me to answer first?
Depends on the hero, right?
Yeah.
Because Fi can't adapt. There's no world where Fi's like, okay, I'm just going to adapt to a mid-range strategy now. It's just like it just doesn't have the block value. He doesn't have the modularity on his cards. Like, they're all just pretty linear. Deal the damage, do the thing. And there's not a lot that he can really do to kind of pivot and deviate. I think the best example in my mind, and the reason why I like Icelander so much, is because she has those dual win conditions, either through tempo or the Frost Hex combo endgame strategy, and being able to recognize and adapt to your opponent's game plan. If they're trying to fatigue you, you notice in the mid game, or you've gone through a lot of your attacks and they've been blocking you out a lot, then it's important on you to kind of pivot through the game and adjust yourself from being that tempo to the end game combo deck.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think I don't know if there's really a clear difference between aggro and mid range in Flesh and Blood. I think mid range is kind of like a weird term that has a lot of carryover from Magic. There's like decks that are trying to just present as big of numbers as possible and don't really have a lot of disruption or on hits. We think of things like Briar, Viscerai, Phi, these aggressive decks that are just like, I do a lot of damage. But then you also can kind of look at decks that are doing a lot of damage, like Lexi and Azalea, which they're doing a lot of damage, but they're kind of presenting more of it through on hits and potentially disruption as well. Especially Red in the Ledger is a big disruptive card. Some of Lexi's ice effects or cards like Hamstring Shot and Fatigue Shot are definitely disruption. And Command and Conquer is kind of the most classic disruption card that I always think of. Just killing their arsenal is really powerful.
Mm-hmm.
So I would say there's like aggressive decks, then there's like disruptive decks that are like mid range isn't really. It feels a little weird to call them mid range because it's not really being mid range. It's like more about being disruptive than being in the middle, I guess. I
Yeah,
don't
I
know.
get what you're saying with the mid range being a hard to pin down term in Flesh and Blood. And in my mind, decks like Dorinthia is kind of like a mid range deck in my mind. These decks that can present medium range numbers on offense, like they can go slightly above rate if you let them do their thing unencumbered, but usually it's hard for them to like break higher than maybe like 15 value on average per turn. Like it's really hard to like do that over the course of the game. But they have a really low floor and all their cards block for 3 and they have a lot of defense reactions and they can kind of play defensively pretty well as well. Like they're not trying to just only block and they're not trying to only attack. You're trying to block when you need to block and attack when you need to attack and hope your cards line up in the way that you need them to when you're doing those game plans.
Mm-hmm. And I guess like compare that to a deck like Lexi where you block a decent amount with Lexi because a lot of the time you don't have a use for your second blue or you're going to cast 3 of a kind anyway, so you don't need these extra cards. I think that's
and that's what makes
that feels very similar.
Well, and that's what makes Lexi so broken is because she doesn't have to choose between playing these kinds of modular things. She just gets to do it all the time. If she needs to block, she can block. If she needs to press a million damage, she can press a million damage. And there's not a lot of tension in her ability or questions for her to do either of those game plans with any given 4 to 6 cards she has available, to 4 to 6 to like sometimes 9 cards available. No, 8 cards available if you play a 3 of a kind from your hand because you go down 1 and then up 3. So yeah, it's just there's so much modularity. She's never going to be choked on action points because of Voltaire. She's never going to be having a whole hand, or it's very 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 rare to catch her with like a whole hand or a whole circumstance where she just can't block. Since all the arrows block for 3, that's just going to be a primary game plan that's just available to her most of the time. So with Dorinthia, you can kind of look at your hand, which was like, okay, so I have 2 blues, a Sink Below, and a Singing Steel Blade. Well, my opponent has to block for my Singing Steel Blade to get value. My Sink Below is offering me to get like blocking anyways. Like I'm just blocking with this hand. It's just a clear hand that I want to block with. But Lexi can look at that same hand of like 2 blue arrows, red infecting shot, and a rain razors, and it's like, oh cool, I can get like 4 value off my rain razors, push the on hit off my infecting shot, and even this potential on hit on my blue arrow, and it still just presents offense perfectly fine. And if she needs to block 9 on that hand, it just blocks 9 as well, and you just arsenal the rain razors. It's just like there's no tension in that hand.
Sure. That is fair. I think Lexi does have a kind of, it's not unique to her. It's something that a lot of heroes have to worry about, but she can run out of cards in her deck, but she's pretty good at killing the opponent before that.
I was about to say,
even if you have to block,
because her numbers go up way higher than decks can block out for on a turn-to-turn basis. And then you factor in her ability to take away opponent's armor with on-hit effects like Drill Shot, and it's just like, okay, she's the best deck. We all know. Still playing Bolton.
So, last question from Zach. What is the general rule of thumb players can use to assess their status in the game? For example, ahead, behind, or on pace. This is definitely hero specific, but he feels like there should be some kind of general guidelines for players.
I feel like we gave a lot of these guidelines on question one. This I feel like you could have lumped these two questions together because they're somewhat similar.
Okay.
Where once again we're just going to say you have to evaluate what cards you have left in your deck, what cards your opponent have left in their deck, what does the equipment situation look like, what does their threat density look like, what does your threat density look like, what does their ability to block look like, what does your ability to block look like for the rest of the game. And you kind of have to assess all of those factors. And I think that's why it's so hard to just give vague general guidelines, because there's just so much to Flesh and Blood. And I don't know if you knew this, Michael, but Flesh and Blood's a hard game. So that's just what makes those baseline heuristics just really hard to say. Because, for example, in Magic, you could say like, okay, when you get 4 lands and 10 life or something like that in this particular matchup, then you need to be really worried about XYZ happening or this play pattern or something like that. But those same threshold in life situations can happen in Flesh and Blood, but they're still much more modular given the constant hand rotating system in the game.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I really agree with your answer. I think like one thing that we do a lot in our Manor University videos through our Patreon is that a lot of the time we'll pause in the middle of the game and you'll ask me who is ahead, how's the game looking for each side, and all those things that you mentioned now are all things we look at. What cards they've used from their deck, what their equipment situation is, of course, the life situation, but there really are a lot of things that go into figuring out whether you're ahead or behind. And sometimes it's kind of obvious. Sometimes you're at 10 and your opponent's at 20 and it's their turn and they have a 4-card hand plus an arsenal. You're probably losing in almost every spot unless they're like basically out of cards in deck. But for the most part, there are a lot of things that go into who's ahead and who's behind.
Yeah, absolutely. Flesh and Blood's hard. Flesh and Blood's complicated, but that's why we like it, baby.
Yeah, it's a good game.
Okay, next question.
All right. This is from John in our Manor Discord. He says, Michael has mentioned that he prefers in-person to online drafts. What are some of the differences and what makes in-person better for learning? This one's kind of aimed at me, huh?
Buddy, all of you.
So not that drafting online is an easily available option anymore, but in-person drafts, I think the biggest thing is seeing everybody at the table after you draft or at the tables playing their decks. You kind of get a better sense of what happened in the draft pod. You can kind of figure out who's in what seat. Like the person next to you, maybe online, you knew that they were drafting Dash, but then in person, you get to see them play, like they play this red boom grenade. You're like, oh, I passed that way. That makes sense. And it kind of like helps tell the whole story better when you see everything in person. And then I think it's also just better preparation for the events that I've called drafts, where you have like, you pick up the pack and they're like, you have 40 seconds and you look and you pick your card, you put it face down in front of you and you can't look at it until you get to the end of the pack. And you can kind of practice doing that too in person.
Yeah, that's true. I think that draft is just, there's a lot of nuance to it that's really hard to get on that online client. A lot of the examples you gave are something that I really agree with. But then there are also things that matter a lot in paper, such as shuffling the cards or making sure that you're not passing them in a specific order or manipulating the cards, or it's a lot more taxing, I feel, to really internalize the cards as like you're looking at them almost one at a time or just slightly fanned out. You're not ever having them all presented to you all at once on a screen. Like you can't lay out all the cards in front of you, look at them and be like, I want that one. You kind of have to be very active while you're holding the card. So there's that tactile sense that goes into it. It just becomes a lot more of an engaging process, as with anything is when you're doing it in the Flesh and Blood as opposed to doing it online. And that just can't be replicated, as well as just the physical presence of those 8 people. When that means that you're going to probably play, even when you're practicing, you're going to play out your games. You're there to play Flesh and Blood. You're there to do it. Whereas when we were online or doing online drafts, it was so common to be like, okay, we did the draft. I got to go by. and then you don't even know their quality of deck. You don't know what even card, like you wouldn't even know if they took that red boom grenade because they're just like, bye, I'm gone. And it's just like, okay. It's
Yeah,
just
or
incentivized a lot more just like draft and just forget about it kind of experiences, I felt like. And that's why I really did not like the online drafting process.
yeah, I think a lot of the time we could get almost everybody or everybody to play the first round. But even then, like just playing one round and then leaving is also not very useful. You really need like honestly, I think playing much more than 3 games with each draft deck would still be very helpful. And I think just in general, that's my biggest complaint is we spend more time drafting than playing a lot when we're testing online, which is just like not an efficient use of our time. I think playing the games teaches you a lot more than the
Yeah,
drafting
absolutely.
process. Um, he had a follow up question too. He said, I'd love to hear you talk a little bit about how you think about deck building and draft. In one of your episodes about building decks and class constructed, I remember you saying a common strategy is to find the most powerful thing a hero does and build around that. I wonder if that thinking is modified at all when you are drafting a deck and building it as you go rather than constructing a deck from all the cards that exist. Um, for me, the short answer is it's pretty similar. You just like you want to when I am drafting a deck, I'm trying to just do the most efficient things that I can do with the cards that I have available. So most of the time, that is converting your 4 cards into as much value as possible. I think there are a few differences. For example, in bright lights, sometimes you also need to be considering fatigue rather than just being as efficient as possible with your 4 cards. But um, for the most part, yeah, I'm just trying to figure out what my hero can do that's powerful and do that. Like Teklo Vasid, you're usually trying to block with your Evo, scrap him, and then play him from your banish zone because that's like plus card
Mhm.
economy, like plus like when you're playing an Evo from banish, it's basically a free card. So even if it only blocks for 2 first, you're still getting 2 plus a card versus if you played it from hand where you're just getting the value at the Evo equip.
Yeah. And what's not the best about Flesh and Blood drafting is since you're always prioritizing maximizing your deck's value and resource curve and worrying about fatigue, when you look at a pack, there might not even be an option for you in that pack that helps you on any front of those game plans. Sometimes you look at a pack and you can just be like, as early as in the middle of pack 2, or sometimes even at the like, even sometimes in the middle of pack 1, if your heroes start drying up, you're just like, oh, like I can't. None of these cards actually help me effectuate any of my game plans because they're not for my hero. That happens less now in Bright Lights because obviously all the cards are draftable and playable in all the decks, but it still comes up where there are still cards that heroes definitely prefer to play over others. Like Max isn't super interested in the Evos and things like that, so it just can
Mm-hmm.
be awkward given the innate flesh and blood game system.
Yeah. The good news is a lot of cards they say 3 in the bottom right corner. They're fine in
True.
limited, so just pick the best card that has a 3 in the corner when you're in that spot, and then usually that's okay. But
Okay. You want me to handle the last question? I think it's the last question. The
yeah,
casual scene, since I'm the casual caster playing Bolton. It just says,
hit
does
me.
Fab need a casual scene and a casual scene to come out fast to survive? Casual scene's already here. Casual scene. I even bought the Tolarian Community College round the table thing. That's as casual scene as it gets. Gather your friends, teach some people, play some games of Ultimate Pit Fight, have a grand old time. It's a really great product, a lot of fun, engaging decks. It was great that they collaborated with the professor, and Ultimate Pit Fight, I think, has established itself as a great casual way to play Flesh and Blood. And then if we take like a half step up from there, I think Blitz is like the next more casual way to play Flesh and Blood. Overall, the games are a little bit faster, it's more accessible, you need less copies of the cards to play the games, and there are more heroes that are viable in Blitz that are in class constructed typically, just given that the life totals are lower. It's just they're just as long as you can kind of get to that 20-ish range pretty fast, you're probably a viable blitz deck. So uh, yeah, I think the casual scene, and then ultimately at the end of the day, we'll never know how many kitchen table players there are. Like there's just going to be
Mhm.
a good percentage of the player base that just goes to the local game store or just orders some product online, hangs out with their buddy Mike, and just plays some games at their kitchen table for like a month, and just like, okay, we're done. That's kind of how we played Sorcery. Like we got those boxes, we played on my table over there for a little while, and then we're done. We played some Sorcery, and maybe we'll play some Sorcery now and then, here and then again. But like that's just how the game is for us.
Yeah, and I heard at some point that EDH was the most popular way to play Magic, but more recently I actually heard. I know we're jumping, but Magic. The most popular way to play Magic is apparently just kitchen table, where people just play with the cards they own. It's not like any constructed format, no set of like format or anything. It's just people playing games with the cards they own. And I think that, like you said, we won't know how much that's happening in Flesh and Blood. I know some of my friends that some of my outside of Flesh and Blood friends that now play a little bit of Flesh and Blood. That's how they play. They just play with the cards they have. They don't know what's banned or what's classic constructed or blitz. They're just like playing with the young heroes or playing with the adult heroes, and they play whatever they want to play, and that's fine. You know? I do have a follow-up question for you though. So you said Ultimate Pit Fight is like kind of it's here, it's good, people are playing it, having a good time. Have you played a game of Ultimate Pit Fight?
No, but I also don't play Commander.
Okay, same. So I was just curious. I do plan on trying the PvE once it comes out. In general, I'm a pretty big fan of good cooperative experiences that you can do with people like friends, because I like playing
I hate
co-op games.
Cooperating is the worst. Grump.
Okay, whatever. I like co-op games. When I'm playing something competitively, I get like really into it, and it's hard to not be competitive. But when you're cooperating, then it's just chill, you know?
Yeah, that's fair. I just can't engage with it as much. I just kind of check out most of the time if I'm not engaged with it on a competitive level, because I just don't. Since I'm not invested in the outcome, it's just whatever. That's why I don't play Dungeons and Dragons either. I'm the worst person you could ever do a Dungeons and Dragons campaign with, because I'll just troll the dungeon master. I'll just have my character hide in a corner or actively work against the team to create that friction to try to make it competitive. So I feel like I'm working, even though it's supposed to be cooperative, I'm still like, I got that feisty, I'm a rebel without a cause kind of attitude. Some might people just call me toxic, but I don't know anybody who would ever call me that anyways on anything I've ever done.
Okay. Interesting.
So yeah, casual formats, they're there. They're happening. PvE will come out eventually. I'm sure it'll be a boon. Everybody wants PvE. I am no doubt it will be a phenomenal product whenever it comes out, because the game of Flesh and Blood is just and the mechanics of it are just so deep that they can do whatever they want with it, however they want with it. And I'm excited to see all the sweet things that they can do with this game system, because it truly is limitless.
Yeah. Now I feel like they have a lot of pressure on them, but
I mean, I guess, but that just comes with like making anything. When you're actually making and producing things, you always have that pressure on you, right?
That's fair.
That's why you don't like making things, because you don't like pressure on yourself. Except for the podcast. You love making the podcast.
I do like making the podcast. It's a good time. I just get to hang out with my buddy. I don't have to actually like do that much. I just show up.
And you don't do the editing. You don't make the thumbnails. You don't do the processing. You just
I'm here.
You do the talking. You win the tournaments. Thanks, buddy.
I prepared the questions for this week, so I did a little bit.
Yeah. Well, any final thoughts then, buddy, as we wrap things up? I didn't realize I was asking another profound question.
I do want to say next week's episode is going to come out a day late, because I'll be late getting back from Dallas. So it'll be out on Friday instead of Thursday.
Yeah. Michael's going to be doing Dallas for a while. So.
What? I'm going to be in Dallas for a while.
Yep. That's what I said.
That's what you said. Okay.
Well, the next time you're doing Dallas, always remember.
Oh my God.